to the nutrition session today that we've got planned. So I'm just going to flick over to the slides. So you should be able to see the nutrition talk for Pharmacist Care today that we're going to go over. So a little bit of background about myself in case you're not too sure who I am. So I am Dan Richardson. I'm a performance nutritionist from the UK. I've been a performance nutritionist for the last 8 years. And I've been working with various different professional athletes and different people from different backgrounds. I studied at Durham University, where I gained my qualification in sports science. And from there, I went on to study sports nutrition in Manchester in the UK, which led me to become a performance nutritionist and a registered Masters of Nutrition and SENA registered nutritionist. I've worked with quite a few teams now. So over the years, as I've been working in and around different sports, I've worked with loads of different clubs and loads of different professional athletes across different leagues, mainly in the UK, but some over in Australia and also in Europe as well. So I've been around a bit when it comes to nutrition. And what I'm going to do today is take you through a little bit of a session of what I discuss with athletes when it comes to nutrition. And then we're then going to open it up to some Q&A as well. So we're going to begin the session with some myth busting. So we're going to have a look at some of the myths that are commonly made by athletes and how we can look to rectify that and ways in which we could look towards doing that. We're then going to have a little look at the foundations of nutrition for sport. So having a little look around why nutrition for athletes are important, more so why I have a job as a professional nutritionist with athletes and things we'd look towards doing with athletes when it comes to working with them. And then also looking at how we can better our performance as well through the power of nutrition. And then finally, we're going to take a look at hydration and sleep for performance. So there's two key areas that often get a little bit overlooked when it comes to nutrition, but they are in fact a nutritionist's job to look after. So from here on out, we're going to have a little chat around nutrition. So I've got some nutrition myth busting for us to do. The first ones we're going to do is true or false. So I'm going to give you a statement. I'm going to give you a few seconds just to have a little bit of a think around what you believe with that statement to be true or false. Some of these might shock you. Some of them you might already know as well. So the first one we've got is true or false. Breakfast, so that first meal of the day, is the most important meal for an athlete. I'll give you a few seconds just to think about that. And let you guys just have a little think of whether you think it might be true or in fact false. So the answer to that one is in fact true. So one of the most important meals for athletes is breakfast. And we'll talk a little bit around energy demands and energy balance a little bit later on in today's session. But essentially what we're looking towards is getting as much fuel in as we possibly can for our athletes early in the day so that they have the energy throughout the whole period of the day to make sure that they've got enough energy to perform all the exercise that they might have coming up. Second one we've got is sugar. So sugary foods is unhealthy and bad for performance, and that you should avoid sugar if you are an athlete. So this is a statement that I hear a lot from a lot of athletes. So I'll let you decide whether you think that might be true or whether you think that might be false. And the answer to that one is in fact false. So sugar is not only just not unhealthy, it's actually really good for athletes. So we use sugars a lot, especially when it comes to that fast release energy that we might require for an athlete to be able to perform at their very best. So it's important that we do have sugar in the athlete's diet to promote fast, powerful energy and also helping them with their performance. Now, there is a time and a place where sugar might not be necessary. If we haven't got exercise planned for that day, we might look towards the more slower release carbohydrates like the pastas and the breads and the rices. But for the most part, sugar is really good for athletes, especially when it comes to performance. And we've got two more of these to answer, and then we'll get into some really good nutrition content. So student athletes specifically, so younger athletes, should eat a variety of different coloured foods. So have a little think about this one, whether you think it might be true or false. I'll give you a few seconds just to think about it. So it is in fact true. And the reason why this one is true is because as a young athlete, a student athlete, we're looking at developing and growing at our very, very best, okay? and making sure that we're looking after the body as best as possible. And a variety of different colors is going to provide us with a variety of different flavors, different spices, herbs, etc. But that's also going to contribute to a more nutrient-dense diet. So if we are able to give a young athlete all of the means and the tools to grow and develop correctly to become the best athlete possible, then we want to give them that chance. And a lot of that comes through having a variety of different colored foods in the diet. That's not to say that adult athletes don't need a variety of food in the diet. It just means that it's more important for those younger athletes to focus on. Last one I believe we've got here, professional footballers or athletes, whatever you want. This one I've taken from an example when I was working at Man City. Was something that I really looked into, was professional footballers eat healthy 100% of the time to perform at their very best. So have a little think, maybe think, yeah, as a professional athlete, not just football, but any professional athlete eats at their very best at all times. Okay, I'll give you a few more seconds to just have a think about that one. Is in fact false. So we follow as nutritionists a rule called 80-20. That means that 80% of the time, athletes are going to be eating the best possible foods they can to make sure that they're getting the most out of their performance. Whereas a small chunk of the time, 20% of the time, they can eat the fun foods and the foods that they want. So it's about balance, and it's about balancing that nutritional plan for a client, for an athlete, to ensure that they're able to get the most out of their foods, but also maintain some form and level of balance when it comes to their nutrition as well. And that example, like I say, was taken from when I was working with Manchester City Football Club with their academy, and actually looking at the players and the way they interacted and worked with food. They very much followed that 80-20 rule, and they've been taught it growing up. So it's something to bear in mind if we're looking to go into nutrition, that it's not all about writing meal plans and diet plans for people. It's about giving them the habits to build to ensure that they can perform at their very best. So covering a little bit of the science, hopefully some of you guys might already understand a lot of this, but I just wanted to recap it in case we didn't. And then I'll talk about some courses and features later on that if we're not too sure of this information, you can seek help for. So macronutrients, the staple of sports nutrition. The reason why I think I'm in a job is because I'm able to deliver the right macronutrients to get the most out of people's performance. So we have carbohydrates. So they contain starchy foods, potatoes, breads, pastas, rice, for example, lentils, beans, chickpeas, you name it. Carbohydrates are in a lot of different foods. You can see there a few of the examples on screen. The reason why we have carbohydrates for sports specifically is that it helps to fuel the high intensity of matches and training days. So it's important we have carbohydrates in our nutritional program for athletes when it comes to fueling matches and training. It also helps to increase endurance, skill, and concentration. Believe it or not, that carbohydrates help the brain to operate and function at its absolute best, which means that they're able to perform at their best by keeping concentrated and keeping their endurance high, which also improves their overall skill level. And finally, it also helps to reduce fatigue and tiredness. So a lot of times you may watch a little bit of football, rugby, whatever, cricket, whatever sport you might like to watch, and you'll notice that players become cramped at the end of a fixture, especially if it runs over that 90-minute period, for example, in football. And that's due to a lack of fueling of carbohydrates. So they may be underfueled in that circumstance, which has caused the cramping, fatigue, and early tiredness as well. So it's important when we work with athletes that we get the right amount of carbohydrates into the body to ensure that they can perform at their very best. In the middle there, we have proteins. We may have heard of proteins, many different sources. As you can see here, we've got our dairy products, such as our cheese, our milks, etc. And then we've also got our eggs, poultry, meat, fish, animal product. And then, of course, the vegan side, which is your likes of your tofus, your kidney beans, chickpeas, lentils, and pulses, for example. Now, proteins are really important for athletes, just as important as carbohydrates, as they help to support recovery of muscles after matches and training. That then also leads to an improved repairing and rebuilding of muscles. And then finally, it also helps to reduce muscular soreness post-match and post-training. Now, something that I find really important when I work with athletes is they're under a lot of demand to play well, perform well, but they're expected to do this on repeat every single day. You know, you look at the likes of a Liverpool side and you look at how many minutes Mo Salah plays, for example. He can play 90 minutes, potentially 3 times a week, depending on the fixtures. Now, he's expected to perform at his very best every time. Now, yes, we need the carbohydrates to fuel those performances. But if he's not able to, you know, reduce the muscular soreness and improve the repairing and rebuilding of the muscles between the fixtures, he's going to struggle to perform at his best. So it's really important that we look towards utilizing protein when it comes to keeping the muscles protected, the muscles strong, and the muscles stable. And then over the other side, one that's often overlooked when it comes to sports nutrition is fats. Now, fats tend to be split into good and bad fats. And this is where the 80% and 20% rule comes in. So a lot of the 20% fats tend to come around those fried foods, fast foods, cooked in high saturated oils, potentially chocolate as well, and things like that. Whereas over the other side, you've got the good fats. So they're like your lean meats, such as your fishes, your steak, for example, your chicken, and then also from places such as nuts, seeds, coconuts, and also olive oil and butters. So natural organic sources of fat. Now, these are really important, believe it or not, in exercise and in professional sport. And that's because fats do fuel some part of the high intensity periods in matches and training for athletes. It also helps to support the maintenance of good health. So without fats, we're able to look after the whole body. We're able to also absorb some of the other nutrients required for sports performance. So it's really important when we're looking towards sports nutrition and looking after athletes that we don't neglect any of these macronutrients, as they all come in different forms. And we're going to take a little look of how they'd be split up on a plate as a percentage a little bit later on for most athletes. But just be bearing in mind that especially when it comes to fats and the fuel that it provides for the high intensity periods of training and matches, that tends to creep in around the 90-minute mark. So after 90 minutes, we tend to have utilized the majority of our carbohydrates, and we'd look towards using our fat stores to push us through the rest of the training or the fixture that we may be taking part in. So we now know about all 3 different macronutrients, but how do you think an athlete would prepare for lots of training? So how would their training day plate look? I want you to just take a few seconds to think a little bit around this. I've got a few of you on the chat screen right now as well that I can see. So if you do want to put anything in the comments, more than happy to take on board some answers. But if we're looking at a training day plate and we're splitting up that day of a plate and how we want it to look, it can actually be quite simple. And a lot of times in nutrition, things get overcomplicated. But it's important that we remember the simples and the basics of nutrition. So when we're looking at a training day plate, we want to be looking at a high amount of carbohydrates. We want to still be getting that protein intake in there. And we also still want to be looking towards getting lots of fruit and veg and a little bit of good quality sources of fats. So you can see here that we want to increase that carb intake. And the reason why is the more training we've got, the more energy we will require. So to maintain the energy balance, we need to be looking at having an increased carbohydrate intake, but also still maintaining our fruit and veg intake and our protein intake for recovery and good health. Now, on the other side, if we were having a rest day or a no exercise day, how would we as nutritionists, or how would I as a nutritionist prepare somebody for that kind of day? Anybody want to have a little bit of a think about that before I reveal the answers on here? So it is, in fact, more fruit and veg. Now, a lot of people, based on the conversations that we had when we were looking at macronutrients, would have maybe suggested proteins because obviously they help with recovery. But in actual fact, the body can only absorb so much protein in a singular day. And that amount of protein on screen right now, as that portion of that plate, is enough protein to make sure that we recover well, we reduce muscular soreness, and we repair the muscles well too. Whereas with fruit and veg, we can have more of that, which means more micronutrients, so more vitamins and minerals that are going to promote healthier recovery, reduced injury risk, and reduced injury risk of illness, should I say. So it's really important when we're looking at actually delivering this kind of stuff to athletes that we're focusing more on the plates and the visuals than actual giving them numbers to work with when we first begin with them. Of course, we can get into numbers later once they've built up those nutritional habits, but it's important you build those habits first. So moving on to hydration. So having a little look around why we would need to hydrate as athletes and the reasons behind it. Now, To me, there's four main reasons when it comes to athletes. Now, when it comes to health, we can look towards the health properties of hydration, which I'm sure a lot of you guys in the careers you're currently in are probably aware of. But it's important that we look towards hydration for sport as well if we want to look to work with athletes. So the first one is that if we're well hydrated, we're going to be able to prevent cramps and early fatigue. So again, one of the other issues that a lot of athletes can have is, especially when it's hot and it's summer, they can find that they begin to sweat a lot, and that then causes early dehydration if they don't rehydrate with the correct amount of water. And we'll get on to the amount of fluids that we need to intake as well in the next slide. But it's important that we understand that athletes cramp and fatigue early tends to be one of two reasons. The first is the carbohydrate intake is too low, so we run out of energy. And the second is that we aren't hydrated enough. So it's important that we manage to get a hydration strategy in place for every athlete that we work with to ensure that they're able to perform at their very best. The second one is it also helps to maintain our energy during matches and training. This is due to the nature of, if we feel dehydrated, that then creeps into those fatigue and cramp, whereas we're able to maintain our energy levels for longer and for longer durations in a fixture and also in training. Now, this can apply to any athlete. So it can apply to a runner, a long distance runner who might need to take on board water during their session, or it might come down to like a sprinter. If they're well hydrated, they're going to be able to utilize and maintain their energy for longer periods of time. It also helps to improve muscle movements, especially if we're performing a skill-based movement. Now, I can't think off the top of my head any sport that doesn't require a level of skill. Even sprinters who are simply running have a level of technique and skill delivered to them when it comes to exercise and performing at the best. So I think it's really important when we look towards hydration that we understand that it's also important for improving muscle movement. Now, muscles move all the time in sport, whether that be that we're jogging back from possession or whether that be that we're sprinting or jumping over hurdles. We need to utilize muscles. Now, without being hydrated, those muscles are going to really struggle to perform at their very best. So it's so important that we maintain our hydration. And finally, the final one is that it increases alertness and skill retention. Now, this can be looked at a little bit towards that health aspect of nutrition as well. So actually, if you guys are well hydrated, listening to me talk about nutrition, then you're going to be able to take on board a lot of the skills that I teach you today and a lot of the information I give you today. Whereas if we're dehydrated, we may struggle towards actually retaining those skills. Hence why I always have a water bottle with me where possible. So it's important as well in sport, increasing the alertness and skill retention of an athlete is going to really help with their mental cognition and being able to, for example, in a skill-based sport, pick the right pass, throw the right kind of pass, whatever it might be, run the right kind of race and tactically beat their opponent. And it's also important to remember as well when we're looking at that alertness and skill retention in training. So if we're alert in training and we're retaining lots of different skill and information, we're going to be able to utilize that in games and in fixtures and future events. Whereas if we're not hydrated, we won't remember those different skills that we've learned. And what will happen is we'll become a worse performer for it when it comes to athletes. So how to stay hydrated? It's a really important topic that quite often divides a lot of opinion, because depending geographically where you're based will depend on the recommendations. But based on the research, and this is, really important, I think, just a quick side note, when we're working with athletes, we're looking towards the latest innovative research. And I'll have a little chat later on about a mentorship program that I run where we break down the key research that's coming out in the areas. So I myself am a published researcher. A few years back, I delivered a study with a rugby team where we assessed the use of carbohydrates as a fluid intake at half time and before a fixture to see whether they had an improvement on effect. But I think if you want to be a top nutritionist in sports nutrition, you've got to be looking towards the latest research, and you've got to be actively practicing research as well, whether that just be on a one-to-one level with your athletes, testing out new different strategies, or whether that be, whole squad developing different research projects. I know I'm involved at the moment in a lot of different research projects that I can't talk about at the moment, but they should be coming through soon in terms of different areas in nutrition where we're going to explore certain avenues for supplementation, energy demands, and actual general nutrition support. So when it comes to hydration and how to stay hydrated, it's important that we look at that daily hydration. So around 2 to 3 liters a day should be enough when it comes to hydrating. However, if we're working with athletes and not general population people, they're going to sweat a lot more than what most people would. So then we look at the during exercise hydration as well. And that typically is around 250 ml every 15 to 20 minutes. So around half a bottle. So here I have 500 ml in my hand. Around half of this would be enough every 15 to 20 minutes. Now, something funny that I always get asked when I work with athletes and I deliver this kind of information is they believe that every 15 to 20 minutes, they need to run off the pitch or run off from training, grab a bottle of water and drink it as quick as they can. This is not true. It just means that over the period of 15 to 20 minutes, they're taking little and often sips of water or fluids to keep themselves hydrated. So it's not about, drinking it all in one go. It's about spreading it out equally. After exercise, we're going to look to replace the fluids that are lost. So again, this during and after exercise hydration should be added to the daily hydration tally. So daily hydration is a tick box. During exercise is another tick box. And then after exercise is another big tick. But we need to make sure we get all 3 of those tick boxes done to ensure that we stay hydrated. So a good rule of thumb is to replace the fluid lost with 1.5 liters over the next 2 hours of non-exercise time. So once we finish our exercise, we then go and look to replace that fluid as quick as possible to ensure that we don't get any of the negative effects that might be associated with dehydration after exercise, such as cramping, injury, illness, or fatigue. And a quick question I always like to ask when we're looking at hydration is, do athletes need sports drinks? So we're not looking at caffeinated drinks here. We're not looking at caffeine. We're going to look at that very shortly. But do they need Lucozades, Gatorades, whatever it might be? You've got 3 options to choose from here. We've got yes, we've got no, and we've got it depends. So have a little think just to yourself if you think there's certain answers that you might be able to give for this one. So the answer is, in fact, it depends. And the reason it depends completely depends on whether or not the athlete's intensity of exercise requires the sports drink. So if we're currently going to be exercising for over 60 to 90 minutes over that period, we can look towards adding some form of sports drinks, but that exercise has to be of a high intensity nature. If it's not, then it's not probably worth having a sports drink. We can get by hydrating from typical fluids such as water. So it's important that we build that relation with an athlete to ensure that they're able to understand these concepts, because a lot of athletes get given, especially professional athletes, get given a lot of free sports drinks to try out, but it's important they use them at the right periods of times during their training times. So continuing on with the theme of hydration, we're going to look a little bit into caffeine. So caffeine is a supplement, especially when it comes to sport, whether that be coffee, whether that be an energy drink, whether that be an actual caffeinated powder, it doesn't matter. It's still a supplement that helps athletes perform. Now, it's a very safe supplement if used correctly. So it helps to improve endurance and it also increases muscular strength, according to the research. But again, we've got to stay within those safe guidelines. So the research suggests that we should have around 200 to 400 milligrams of caffeine 60 minutes before an event. And that we should never exceed that 400 milligrams before a tournament or an event or training. Now, it's important to remember that caffeine adds up quite quick. So, for example, this morning, I've had potentially 2 coffees and I'll probably have a 3rd coffee this afternoon after this session and after lunch. Now, that adds up to probably around 300 milligrams, maybe 250 milligrams of coffee. But if I was to then go to the gym or go and train later on today and have a pre-workout supplement that maybe have 200 milligrams in, I would be over my recommended dosage for the day. So it's important that we don't just count the caffeine that we have before exercise and that we count the caffeine that we have in a 24-hour period. Now, usually when I'm doing this kind of session in person, I get a lot of questions saying, well, hang on a minute, Dan, how do I know how much caffeine is in a product? Well, here's a bit of a detail of some of the products that we can look towards using for caffeination. So for example, if I was to have a regular cappuccino or latte like I've had this morning, I would be around 300 milligrams because I've had 2 coffees and I'm planning to have a third one. Now that suggests to me that I could be potentially nearly over my caffeine limit for the day. Whereas if I'd had something like a can of Red Bull, I'd have only had 80 milligrams, or even better yet, I could have had a cup of green tea or black tea, which would have given me around 30 milligrams. But it's important to understand that these numbers add up, and we can find, even like in a can of Coke, especially, full sugar Coke, that we can find in a can that there is 49 milligrams of caffeine on average. So it's important to remember that and make sure we add up our caffeinated beverages. Just moving a little bit deeper into that hydration side of things and electrolytes. So probably something, if you're familiar in sport, you might have heard of. You may have seen products like you see on the screen here. And actually, electrolytes are important. They're important for hydration and also energy. On training days, especially for in the heat, we need to be taking on board electrolytes as athletes and replacing what is lost through sweating. They can just be simply added to water, and the serving size often depends on the product you are using. Now, there is a way of making homemade electrolytes, and I do this a lot with athletes. Of course, a lot of athletes I work with are sponsored, so they get given free electrolytes. But there is a way of doing it, which is where you add pink Himalayan salt and some juice that has sugars in there as well, that you just mix that into water, and that allows for a homemade electrolyte mix. There's multiple other different products that you could add to a homemade mix, but I think that's the most basic one you can look for. But I think electrolytes are important, especially when we're looking on training in the heat. So especially during summer, as we sweat a lot more and we need to replace the sodium and the electrolytes that are lost through sweating. So athletes and sleep, really, really, really huge topic that's coming out in the research at the moment. It's been around for a few years now, but it's coming to the forefront. People are starting to understand the information that we're getting from sleep and how it can affect an athlete. So really quick question for you guys. How long should we be sleeping every night? So you can have a little think about this. We've got 3 options. We've got A, 5 to 7 hours, B, 7 to 9 hours, or C, 8 to 10 hours. Have a quick think. If you want to stick it in the chat or in the comments, you're more than welcome to. But if you want, just have a little bit of a think around that. So the answer is, in fact, 7 to 9 hours. For some reason, usually it pops up with a little circle around it, but for some reason the animation isn't working. But 7 to 9 hours is the amount of sleep that athletes and most adults require. Now, for a little bit younger, we may require a little bit more. So for under 16 years of age, we may require, or under 18, sorry, we may require 8 to 10 hours. And if we're a little bit older, as in 65 plus, which I'd like to think there's not many athletes performing at 65 years of age, they'd maybe look to around that 7 to 8 hours sleep instead. But it's important to remember 7 to 9 hours is the rule of thumb. And you want to give yourself as much opportunity as possible to sleep in an evening. So if you know you want 8 hours sleep, give yourself 9 hours. That gives you half an hour to fall asleep, 8 hours to sleep, and half an hour to wake up gently. Now, the reason why athletes need sleep is, of course, there's many health issues which you guys in your pharmacist careers will know about already, and the sleep deprivation issues that are caused. But did you know that athletes having a lack of sleep can actually increase the risk of injury? So I believe the risk of injury doubles with 2 hours less sleep than what you expected, and it actually quadruples if you have 4 hours less sleep than required. So, as a professional athlete, one of the worst things that can happen in your career is an injury or something that causes a problem that stops you from playing for a long period of time. And this is something that is, really true to some athletes, hence why sleep is so important. The reasons why we also need to sleep, aside, from any of the lack of sleep issues, like I've already mentioned, is that it dramatically reduces skill level and the ability to learn new skills. So if we are training, let's say as an athlete, and an athlete's training and he's gone out on the pitch and he's learned all these new skills, if he doesn't sleep really well that evening and form those memories that are required, then he's going to really struggle to actually keep pushing on and learning about those different memories and skills that he needs to perform at his very best. And then the last one we've got here is that it has a negative effect on sleep and cognitive performance. So it's important to remember, it doesn't just have an effect on the physical side of the body, but actually the cognitive skills that we have and the functions and the ability to pick out a pass in football, for example, or hit the best shot in badminton or tennis, or potentially, make the right kind of run in rugby, for example. It's going to stop us from being able to achieve them. Not only that, it may also have a negative effect on our ability to think positively towards sport. So as athletes, needing to have that positive reformation when it comes to our memory and our ability to think about the sport we're playing in, sleep can often have a negative effect on that too. Something I want to draw your attention to, so a little bit of research that I believe has been around a few years now, is the type of body composition that we can achieve can actually be impacted by a lack of sleep. So hopefully this animation works quite well. But essentially we've got two groups. So we've got over here, group one, we've got the sleep restricted group. So they were given 6 or less hours to sleep each evening for a whole week. The other group on the other side, the non-sleep restricted group, were given as much time as they'd like to sleep and as much time as they require for the body to recover. They both underwent the same diet and they both underwent the same training program. But what's interesting about the results, as you can see here, is that weight loss was around the same, okay? So they were both on calorie restricted diets. So they were on diets that was designed to make them lose weight. So one of the big things you can see here is that weight loss was around the same for both groups, regardless of whether they slept or not, okay? But what's really important to see is that fat loss on both groups was much different, and so was fat-free loss. Now, fat-free loss is usually speaking around muscle mass, or some of that is made up of muscle mass. Now, you can see here in the sleep-restricted group that fat loss was only 0.6, whereas fat loss in the non-sleep-restricted group was over double that at 1.4 kilograms. And then the same with the fat-free mass loss. So the muscle mass loss in the sleep-restricted group was almost 1.1 kilograms more than the non-sleep restricted group. So if you have an athlete or a client who's looking to lose weight and you put them on a calorie restricted diet, if they're unable to get the amount of sleep they require each evening, they're going to really struggle to actually be able to lose the right type of weight. Now on the scales, it'll show they're losing weight. Of course, they're on a calorie restriction, but the type of weight they're losing, it's really important to see that, it wouldn't be the fat which you'd ideally want them to lose. It would be the muscle that they'd be losing, which is, kind of shocking, but also at the same time, not surprising, because sleep is really important for good overall health and maintenance of body composition. Last little bit on sleep. And then what I'm going to do is I've got a few questions down here that I'm going to answer. And then if you've got any questions, you can ask them in the comments as well. But always when we're looking to sleep, a few little tips that we can give to athletes when we're working them is go to bed earlier. So athletes can't always control the time they wake up in the morning because they've got certain training or commitments to get to, but they can always go to bed earlier to ensure they get a full night's sleep. Another one here is to control the light in the bedroom. So you may know about kind of like, blue light, etc., and all the research that's coming out around that area. More than happy to discuss that with anybody who's interested in a little more detail. But essentially, controlling the light and ensuring we've not got a bright light shining in our face from our phones when we're trying to go to bed for athletes. And also keeping to a schedule is so important for an athlete. So athletes love routine and they love to stay to a schedule. So it's important that they do keep to that schedule where possible. And then a few other bits that I always give to athletes when they're away from home is, magnesium and chamomile teas are great for supporting sleep, along with lavender sprays and reading a book before bed. And finally, if an athlete is sharing a room with a noisier athlete or somebody who likes to stay up a little bit later, an eye mask and earplugs are always an essential when they're away from home and away from their home comforts. So that's the basis of nutrition. I think I've tried to cover a lot of different areas and angles when it comes to nutrition, looking at hydration, sleep, and also just generally nutrition, just to give you a bit of an idea of the fundamentals of nutrition, especially when it comes to sport. Of course, there's so much more to talk about, and that's what I'm going to get on to next, is that I have 2 opportunities that I wanted to share with you where you can come and work with me directly. So the first opportunity that we've got is the new nutrition course that we're going to be releasing at the end of this month. So the nutrition course is the complete nutrition practitioner course. It's accredited worldwide meaning that you'll get an actual qualification that gives you the right to work with nutrition-based clients as a nutrition coach. And it's really one of those courses that, you know, based on everything we spoke about today, we go into 1,000 times more detail with everything off the back of that. And that's something that, you know, I wanted to just put out there and let you guys know. But if you are interested, my email is also on the screen, and I'll be happy to give you some more details on it. It's completely remote and online studying, and included within the course is all of the content, the brochure, the handbook. There's also a PDF ebook about how to run your own, you know, nutrition business and support services for clients. But it also provides you with the opportunity to have webinars with myself, and we also assess your skills as a nutritionist, so you're not let out into the world without, you know, real life experience. So I think it's really important, if you are considering somewhat of a career or upskilling yourself in nutrition, that you look towards doing this course. Now, it is only 4 to 6 weeks of online studying, depending how quick you get it done, but there'll be opportunities where you'll have video conversations with me, and you'll also have various different, you know, opportunities to work with me. We're also planning and trying to work some sort of internship scheme within this course, whereby you get to work with some of my clients as an intern, and you get some real hands-on experience of working with athletes remotely from wherever you are in the world. So I think it's important to remember that, you know, you don't have to be over in the UK where I am to work with the athletes I work with. And that'll give you some really good hands-on experience in that sense. Now, one for those who already have a little bit of nutrition experience. For some reason, it's gone a little bit blurry on the screen, but I can explain what is said on there. So I offer a mentorship program which supports nutrition practitioners and those who have already got maybe a nutrition qualification and want to upskill a little bit. And that's to help you develop as an individual nutritionist and also increase your value, growth, and knowledge when it comes through experiences and exposures of nutrition. So the program and the mentorship program that I offer, you get a one-to-one monthly call with me, and it's around 45 to 60 minutes long, where we talk about the latest research, we talk about key materials, how you can improve as a practitioner, and also try to give you some real-world experience from my experiences too. I think this mentorship is also really important for anybody who's looking to work in sport as well. And finally, also, you know, as part of this, you'll get key materials from myself, other practitioners, other research-related documents that are aligned with the needs and the area of study you want to study in. You also get access to all of my experience and knowledge over the last, it's now 8 years, used to be 6 years when I started this, 6 years of working in performance sport. So looking at, you know, trying to show you the real world of sport and how you can actually go about becoming a practitioner in sport. And then you'll also get access to some of my key contacts at supplement companies and sports food companies, where you can talk to them around supplementation, and you can support them with various different aspects of their business as well. So you can learn the entire structure of how nutrition works in a professional sense. Now, this comes at £110 a month, but you do require some level of nutrition or pharmaceutical knowledge to be able to take part in the mentorship scheme. So obviously we can have a chat, and if anybody's interested in this one as well, again, just send an email to the same one and letting me know which course you'd be most interested in. So we've got two options. We've got the course, which is a one-off payment of just under 750 British pounds, and that is an actual qualification, which is accredited worldwide, which means that you'll have that qualification of nutrition from doing the course. And then you've also got the mentorship program for the guys that have already got some level of knowledge in pharmaceuticals or in nutrition. So it's up to you guys which one you potentially would want to do. Now, what I'm going to do is open up to some questions based on kind of what we've spoke about today. So I think there's a private chat which you could possibly put a little bit of message in, or there is also a comment section as well where you can come and ask me questions in the comments. I do actually have a few comments already preloaded on my phone from messages that were sent earlier, which I'm going to answer now in case there is no other questions from there, but there should be some coming through on here. So first question we've got is how do you start in the nutrition field correctly, and what is the steps to be towards becoming a professional nutritionist? Now, you have two options here. The more difficult option, I think, is to look towards going down the university degree route and studying like I did for a few years. However, the problem with doing that and going down the route of university is that it takes a very long time to actually get that qualification complete. And for guys that are already looking at, working in the pharmaceutical industry as pharmacists, then, you don't want to be spending all that money and all that time doing that. The best, I think, advice I could possibly give you when it comes to, doing something like this is looking towards a course like the one I offer with Fitco, which is a complete nutrition practitioner course. There's so many different courses out there now, but the problem with the majority of the courses, they aren't built for practitioners. They're built for personal trainers and fitness coaches, where we've designed a course that's specific for nutritionists wanting to look towards working as a professional nutritionist, not people that are looking to be a personal trainer or a fitness advisor. Now, if you are a personal trainer or you are somebody who does fitness coaching, then this course is still good for you because you're going to learn more than what any of your peers would ever learn. So I think it's really important when we're looking at, nutrition courses that you select one that works best for you. And I think as well, just getting experience, and hence why on this course and on my mentorship program, we're looking towards providing that real world experience for you guys if you do come and join the course, because, it's really important that you're able to draw upon case studies and examples of when you've delivered good sports nutrition, whereas quite often or not, a lot of these courses are just 4 to 6 weeks long. And then all you do is learn the theory, but never get to apply it in a practical setting, which then sets you back in comparison to those that have done degrees like myself who have worked with athletes as well. So just be in mind with that when we are looking towards becoming a professional nutritionist. Okay, we've got a few more questions on the Facebook here. You can also add some into the post if you want on there. But one of the ones here we've got is, what is the right basis for nutrition and the points built on it? And how do we know each person's inhibited systems, such as naturally slim, fat, bodybuilder, power player, athlete, pregnant or child? What types of diets and how do you know the best elements in nutrition? So I'll answer this in 3 different ways. First one is, how do you know the right basics for nutrition and the points that it's built on? It's all based around the research that's currently out there and available. And that's where all the different numbers come from that you provide to players and athletes and all the various different people. Now, one thing that it is important to remember is obviously the presentation I delivered today was something that I'd utilize those kind of slides and those kinds of presenting skills with athletes that want to learn about nutrition. But there is also athletes as well that want to know the numbers and the different characteristics that come with nutrition. And in that sense, it's important that we look towards the numbers in the research of how many carbohydrates, proteins, and fats are required for specific age groups and numbers. Again, we cover this in the course, and I can cover this in the mentorship program as well, because it all depends on the athlete that you're currently working with. And then the second part of the question was, how do we know a person's inhibited system? So how do we know what their natural body composition is? Now, there's not much we can do unless we do some sports related testing on the athlete, but it's important to just work out this type of nutrition that works best for them. And that sometimes comes with a little bit of trial and error. Sometimes we don't get it right the first time, so we try a different approach and a different strategy that should hopefully help them to progress and perform. And then the final side of it is, how do you know the best elements in nutrition? And I'm assuming that means generally, how do we know what the best practices are to deliver from nutrition? First of all is learning the basics from a course and ensuring that you understand all the basic structures. The second part of it is then having a really good mentor that shows you the right kind of research and helps you to critically appraise specific research that might be considered important when it comes to nutrition. So it's important we always stay on top of the research and we look towards the types of research that we'd want to be utilizing with specific athletes. Few more questions to come up. The second one is, what is the need in nutrition when dealing with diseases such as diabetes and deficiencies? Really good question. So diabetes and health-related issues tend to come mainly from obesity. So when we're dealing with an obese patient, what we need to understand is that it is reversible through the power of nutrition. So you can typically, if you spot diabetes early on and it's diagnosed early enough, we can actually reverse a lot of the health-related illnesses, and they come from weight loss. So it's important that we promote the nutrition for healthy weight loss, but not necessarily fast weight loss. So actually, quite often, a lot of online social media people will try and get, the quickest fat loss that you possibly can, and the quickest movement that you possibly can. However, the problem with that is that it's not sustainable. So it's about delivering the right nutrition that's going to provide healthy habits. It's going to provide various different, abilities of getting the right kind of nutrients in. And then also it's going to provide something that's going to last a lifetime. So once they've lost the weight, it never comes back on, and they never have to deal with that health-related issue again. When it comes to deficiencies, you want to be getting a doctor involved, of course, but you can do stuff. And if you quickly researched, for example, like foods high in calcium, you'd see that dairy products, milk, fortified cereals, lots of different things have high calcium content to replace that deficiency. So we can utilize food to help replace deficiencies. Sometimes it's to do with an absorption issue, which is more of a bodily problem that a general practitioner or doctor would have to look towards prescribing some sort of strong, kind of vitamins and minerals to help with deficiencies. But most of the time, it can be dealt with by looking at somebody's diet, analyzing and assessing the diet, and then giving recommendations off the back of that. We've got a couple more questions to finish on, and then I'll wrap up the session. So the next one we've got, another great question, is can we know the relationship of insulin to nutrition and how to deal with it? So actually, I don't deal much as a sports nutritionist with insulin and nutrition, and that tends to be around the diabetic and the health side of nutrition. So that's kind of a question that I'm not going to look to answer in great detail, as I think I probably need to go away and research that side of nutrition a little bit more. And that's something you'll learn as a practitioner, that as a nutritionist, you're not going to know every answer to every single question, but it's important that you're able to go away and do that research. So what I'll do is I'll take note of your question. I'll go away and find out the answers via the correct research, as the current research that I think I know is a little bit outdated. So I'll go and get some more later research for you to be able to deliver on that question for you. And then we've also got another one of, how does nutrition relate to high-low inclinations rate in the body? So in terms of looking at the in that sense of things, I think it's important that we first learn what incinerations mean. Let me have a little look and see. But I think what we mean is in terms of like if we had high-low diets, so different types of diets. I'm assuming this is what you mean by that, whether we had like a high surplus diet or a deficit diet. So if we were to eat a lot of various different foods, what we're going to find is that we have a lot of various different, kind of vitamins and minerals in there. So it's important that we do get the right kind of vitamins and minerals to ensure that we get the right kind of foods in there. If we have a diet that's low in a specific product, it's important that we look towards helping with that by delivering the right kind of nutrition support. Whereas a lot of the times it's difficult to kind of deliver the right kind of nutrition to somebody who maybe don't have those habits built up. So it's really important that we look towards habit building when it comes to that style of nutrition, and ensuring that an athlete or a client doesn't go up and down, high and low, and yo-yo with their diet, and they get the right kind of foods and nutrition in where possible. So I think it's really important in that sense that we look towards those areas of nutrition. So just to summarize, as they're the questions that I've got on here for now, I believe that was all the questions. I'm just going to quickly check LinkedIn to check there wasn't any other questions in and around there. Maybe just give me 2 seconds to pull up the post on LinkedIn and just double check that there is no areas on here. So I think there wasn't, which is brilliant. So what I want to suggest or say is that just to wrap up today's session, thank you so much for listening. Just remember that there's the opportunity to come and work with myself on the nutrition course or as a mentor, where we can give you a real world sports nutrition experience as practitioners to give you the best possible outcome as well. So have a little think around the area. If you do have any further questions or you do have any questions around the courses or the mentorship, or even you want to go give me a follow on Instagram, I think my @ should be up on screen now. I'm very active on Instagram, so if you have any questions on there, you can go give me a follow at DRN Nutrition, or you can send me an email if you've got some questions. It's dan@drnnutrition.co.uk. We also have a Twitter, DRN Nutri, if you want to go and follow that. If you're more of a Twitter user, we just post the same stuff across all platforms. But I just want to thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a really good rest of your day. And like I say, just take on board the nutrition advice that we talked about today when working with athletes. And if it's something that you're interested in doing, then we have a course available to do so. But no, thank you very much for listening, guys, and take care. Bye-bye.